Hi, can you all guys hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the call this late today. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Ashwin, have around 12 years of strategy consulting experience. Started at Bain and Company, my strategy consulting journey, worked in the Middle East and then moved to the US. Um, then worked with Deloitte as a director and also worked with Goldman Sachs as a strategy lead. Now what I do is that I coach and help professionals and students get into top tier consulting firms, primarily McKinsey, BCG, Bain, but also other strategy consulting firms, notably EY Parthenon, Monitor, Deloitte. So far, I've helped 200 students and professionals get into top tier consulting firms. Um, I've been doing coaching for the last 5 years and helped multiple people in US, UK, and Middle Eastern office specifically. Folks get into these offices, right? That's a bit about me. And as we progress, I will share some bits about my experience further. Unfortunately, because of the number of people who are joining in, I'll not be able to get intros from all of you. But if there is any question that you have as I am progressing through the slides that I have, feel free to put it on the chat window and I will respond intermittently as I am, viewing the chat window. Right. Today we will be covering the application part. Right. How do you structure your resume? How do you um, write your cover letter, and how do you network in order to get the interview, right? So this session is going to be about securing the interviews, getting the interview invite, right? Let's start with initially understanding the recruitment process within consulting, right? Because it's important to for us to understand how firms view recruiting before we go into the application steps, resume, cover letter, and networking, right? Now, consulting recruiting is a bit unique in the sense that relative to traditional industries, in strategy consulting specifically, you'll see a lot of senior partner involvement, right? So imagine um, if you have graduated or if you are in some of the target schools, right? You would know the number of partners and number of senior people come to visit target school campuses, hold events, talk about their specific firm, right? So there is a lot of senior level involvement in recruitment relative to industry. High recruiting investment, right? I graduated from INSEAD 10 years back, and I remember the kind of parties and the kind of events that Bain and McKinsey and BCG would sponsor, right? So there's a lot of investment put in by the firms to hire the right candidates, right? And from an attraction perspective, what attracts people towards strategy consulting is one, yes, the top percentile pay in any geography. Strategy consulting firms would be among the 90th percentile in terms of relative pay that they offer to people at any level, and accelerated development, right? In a span of 8 to 10 years, you could look at becoming a partner, which is quite a rapid progression that strategy consulting offers, right? So it's a very attractive career, right? And the reason is the key differentiating aspect for any strategy consulting firm is talent, right? Without great talent, they will not survive for long, right? So they invest a lot of money and resources on getting the right talent, right? What that translates to also is significant competition to get into these top tier consulting firms, right? So every year, consulting firms, top tier consulting firms, at least receive millions of applications, right? If statistics are to be believed, I think McKinsey last year received around 1 million applications globally, and they hired less than 1%, right? This is something which McKinsey had put out. So it's quite competitive, right? The acceptance rate tends to be between 1 to 3%, right? So lower for some competitive offices like New York, London, and for some other offices which are not, which could be local offices, the acceptance rate might be slightly higher, right? And because of this level of competition, um, you would have to create an application, including resume, cover letter, and also network aggressively to be considered for the interview, right? So your first impression that the firm will get is based on the resume and the cover letter that they will read. And also, if you have networked and if you're able to get somebody within the firm to refer you, that also helps in your application, being standing out and being differentiated, right? We will talk in detail about the resume and cover letter, but once you are through the getting the interview stage, you move on to the passing the interview stage, right? Which entails the case interview and the fit interview for McKinsey's personal experience interview, right? So today we will focus on getting the interview, resume, cover letter, and the networking part, right? Be it the screening stage wherein they are assessing your resume and cover letter and trying to determine whether this individual, right, will be an effective future consultant, or the passing the interview stage through case interviews and fit interviews. What firms are trying to do is that they're trying to assess whether you will be successful as a consultant, and typical assessment is done around four broad dimensions, right? You take um, any of the candidate scoring sheet of these top tier consulting firms. These tend to be the key themes, right? In fact, when I was at Bain, I had conducted a lot of interviews, and we used to get a hiring, the um, evaluation sheet when we are doing case interviews and fit interviews. Also, during the resume screening stage, there used to be a candidate evaluation sheet, wherein these were the key themes, right? The first theme is, can this individual navigate complex business problems, right? Because the work of a consultant is solving complex problems for clients, right? So through your application, right, through your educational achievements, through your the work experience that you have, through other community and leadership activities that you might have been involved in, what we're trying to assess is that, does this person have the intellectual capacity to deal with tough complex problems that a consultant would need to navigate, right? So that's the first element. The second is, can this individual work well with clients, right? So one is to be a good problem solver. Second is to be a client ready problem solver, right? Which means you need to be able to take the client along, right? So you may have the best analysis, but if you cannot influence a senior stakeholder, that analysis may not create impact, right? So for this, we look at um, your community leadership activities, or if your work experience, the kind of impact that you have delivered at work while working with people, right? There's also the cultural fit element. When I say cultural fit, different consulting firms have different emphasis on certain behaviors, right? For example, Bain emphasizes more on collaboration. So they like to see, do you work well with people, right? Do you have achievements where you have achieved significant impact while leading and influencing people, right? The last element is coachability, right? So coachability, at least in the resume screening stage, is assessed based on the kind of development at work you might have, or the kind of extracurricular achievements that you have, right? So all these key themes are assessed when somebody is screening your resume and cover letter and trying to determine, should we invite this person for an interview, right? And if I go deeper into each of them, right, problem solving, what we typically try to assess is your analytical depth, right? uh, I like to joke that firms, if you think about it, right, consulting firms are trying to at least hire one math nerds, right, somebody who is good at quantitative analysis, right, high achieving, right? So consulting firms are all about achievement, right? So because if you have to deliver impact to a client, you need to be somebody who has a lot of resilience, who has a lot of drive, right? So if you have some significant accomplishments in your career, work experience, as well as in education, that's evidence for firms that you will be able to deliver impact in client situations, because you're somebody who likes to put in the effort, right, to achieve certain high impact outcomes, right? um, Also the cultural fit, right? So the third thing, so math nerd, right, high achieving and amazing with people, right? Because consulting is all about delivering impact in team oriented environments, in a client setup, or working with internal teams, right? So you need to be somebody who has worked with people. So a lot of your achievements should be about leading teams, driving impact while coordinating with diverse set of people, right? um, and when I was screening resumes, right, and it's true for typically McKinsey, BCG, Bain, as well as top tier consulting firm screening, right, what they will look for is first academic excellence, right? Because when they see, so when I used to see somebody has gone to a prestigious university, he has a high GPA, typically GPA greater than 3.5 is considered good for by a lot of top tier consulting firms, um, and high standardized scores, right, be GMAT, GRE, ACT, SAT, right? So this is evidence, right, that is, you have the intellectual capacity to do the job, right? And also you're somebody who is willing to put in the effort, right? Because all these um, cannot be achieved if you're one, not worked a lot of time, put in a lot of effort, and second, if you don't have the intellectual capacity, right? So this is so for consulting firms like to see academic excellence, right? From a work experience, what they like to see is big brand names. If you worked with Goldman, if you worked with Google, if you worked with these entities and you have done the core work, let's say you have done investment banking at Goldman, or if you have done, let's say, core engineering work at Google, right? So there is some degree of evidence there that you were good at what you did, right? Otherwise, Goldman or Google wouldn't have hired you, right? Firms also like to see rapid career progression, right? So if you have um, a fast track promotion, do highlight it in your resume, right? Also, any projects that you have done internationally, right? Because firms, especially when you join consulting, you'll be working with um, diverse set of people, right? So McKinsey, for example, loves to call itself a global firm. So any project that is staffed would consist of international teammates. So therefore, if you worked internationally, or if you worked with people from different cultures, it's good to highlight it, right? And third, impactful achievements. So as I said, right, consulting firms love math nerds, they love high achieving people, and they love candidates who are amazing, working with diverse set of people, right? So any achievement statement that you write, always start with the impact, right? The more quantifiable result that you can bring in your achievement statement, the more easier for the resume screener to identify you as somebody who is high potential, right? Also, any awards, any scholarships, anything that you can highlight does give the resume screener the confidence that you might be a good candidate, right? We will talk about more in terms of how do you structure your achievement statements, but the key principle here is that try to quantify as much as possible and try to highlight the impact that you have delivered, right? If it's a professional work experience achievement statement, it should be about either the financial impact or some operational impact that you were able to deliver, right? And finally, as I said, right, you should be amazing with people, right, for firms to actually consider you. So any leadership potential that you can demonstrate, either spearheading projects, leading teams, if you don't have work experience, if you have, you can highlight active participation in student organizations, community leadership roles. So any evidence that a resume screener can find that you are somebody who has the leadership potential to influence a set of people, right, will help you stand out in the application process, right? But the key themes remain, right, which is all this evidence that a resume screener is collecting is to assess whether you would do whether you have the problem solving skills, whether you have the client readiness skills, do we have the cultural fit, right? Emphasis on certain behaviors that a firm wants, and finally the coachability aspect, right? The learning agility is what firms like to see, right? Um, Great. So I think there are some questions, I think, in the chat. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of questions, in fact, in the chat. So let me answer some of them, and I'll continue, right? Um, so I think Ijona is asking, how can you be memorable, right? So as I explained here, right? Academic achievements, big brand names in your CV, um, impactful achievements where you are able to highlight the quantitative impact, right? And leadership potential where you highlight that you're good with working with people. All this, right, will help you stand out, right? Um, so how to compensate missing a key attribute factor? If you have time, get the required experience. For example, if you think you're lacking in the leadership aspect, you can get involved in certain volunteering or community activities, right, so that you can bring in those achievements, right? If you think that you're lacking in the intellectual capacity that you need to demonstrate, maybe I mean, if you have time, again, you can work on your CGPA. If you have any other standardized test scores that gives confidence to the resume screener that you have the intellectual capacity, that's good to include, right? Yeah, but these are the key themes, key principles, I would say, right? I think Thomas is asking, you're a non-STEM finance or economics major, right? So here, one thing I would note here is, it doesn't matter if you're a business major or a non-business major. You can acquire problem solving and other, or you can showcase problem solving skills and other skills even if you are a non-business major, right? So if you have a high CGPA in let's say you're doing an arts degree, right? But if you have a high CGPA, and if you have in your arts degree, you have taken relevant business focused courses, I would highlight them under relevant courses, that you have taken business focused courses and you're interested in business. That gives the resume screener some confidence that, okay, you are interested in business, and that's why you have taken these courses in spite of your undergraduate degree not being in business, right? And other achievements, if you can demonstrate, for example, the internships, if you have done internships with big brand names, or focused on, let's say, certain business impact, that's something that you can highlight too, right? So let me continue now, right? Um, and I will take more questions as I go through, right? So when you're crafting a resume, I think there are four key steps you need to follow, right? First, you need to define the layout, decide on the layout, right? Then you need to craft your master resume. By master resume, I mean when you are um, writing out your achievement statements, don't try to condense it to a page. List all your achievement statements, and then try to prioritize the ones with the highest impact, right? And finally, refine for impact, right? We will talk about the REC format, result, action, context format. Um, Essentially, what you should be focusing on is, how do I make it resume? How do I make, or how do I structure my resume in a form that the resume screener, when he's looking at my resume, and trust me, a resume screener or a consultant, right, who's viewing your resume, will not spend more than a minute on your resume, right? If they find something interesting, they might spend more time, right? But they will not spend, in some cases, maybe it's 30 to 45 seconds, right? So what you should be doing is that highlighting your impact, right, on the left, right, because people read from left to right. So we will talk about the RAC format, that you, so that you have the result on the left, right? And make it as quantifiable as possible, right? And finally, customize to the role, right? So if you're applying for, let's say, McKinsey Digital, right, that practice, or then you should be highlighting a different set of skills, versus if you're applying for a healthcare practice role, right? So you will have to customize your CV depending on the kind of role and the firm or the office that you're applying to, right? um, so let me start with the layout, right? So consulting firms like very simple, clean layout, right? And I will show you an example CV also. But what I recommend is, first have your contact information in the header, right? Full name, phone number, email address, LinkedIn profile. If you're including your LinkedIn profile, ensure that your LinkedIn profile and what you have in your CV is aligned, right? Because if a resume screener looks at your resume, and then he goes to your LinkedIn and looks you up, and if he sees that the experience is not aligned, that raises red flags, right? And if there is confusion, they may rather interview somebody else than interview you, right? So ensure that your LinkedIn and what you have in your resume is aligned, right? And work experience, have the company, right, company name, have your job title below, right? Also have the location, location and dates, right? um, we will talk about the RSC format in a bit more detail, right? But the essential element here is, you should be focusing on what impact you delivered, right? Not the routine activities that you were doing, right? If you were doing modeling work, for example, Excel modeling work, right? Don't just say, I did modeling work for this client, right? Rather, talk about the impact. For example, you were able to close a $1 billion deal because you were able to project the future revenues for this particular entity, and therefore gave the investor the confidence to invest in this particular entity, right? So you'll have to talk about the impact you deliver, not the routine activities that you were doing, not the transactional work that you were executing, right? Because all the routine activities that you do are for the purpose of some broader impact, right? So highlight the broader impact. right? And include your key degrees, right? If you are an undergraduate student, you don't have a lot of professional experience, I recommend starting with the education. If you're somebody who brings a lot of experience, like MBA students already have prior experience, in that case, you can start with your professional experience, right? But nevertheless, start with your strongest point, right? If you come from a target school with, let's say, very little experience, like 1 or 2 years of experience, then I would start with education. If you don't come from a target school, but you have some impressive professional experience, you worked um, with a well-renowned firm. Let's say you worked with Morgan Stanley, did investment banking there. Start with that, right? So start with the highlight, right? Start with what helps you stand out, right? Any leadership activities that you can highlight, volunteering, community, extracurricular achievements, right? uh, you know um, Include that in the resume, right? And finally, you have some space for skills and interests, right? um, so um, so relevant skills and interests can also become good conversation starters if you get the interview invite and somebody is interviewing you, right? So it could serve as that initial rapport building avenue for you, right, when you are interviewing with the firms, right? um, Also to note here is that when I coach candidates, a lot of candidates, what they do is that in their resume they tend to highlight very obvious skills like Microsoft Office Suite or Google Workspace. Now, these are not skills, right? Skills and also include skills that are relevant to consulting, right? So that are transferable to consulting. So any quantitative modeling that you have done, any programming work that you have done, like Python, SQL, SQL, or Power BI. So all this is directly transferable. So include those kind of skills, right? Exclude Microsoft Office or Google Workspace because everybody knows Excel and PowerPoint, right? But if you have advanced Excel modeling skills, if you have done some certifications in, let's say, Tableau, you could include that, right? Now let's focus on how to build your master resume, right? Which is list all your accomplishments first, right? All your awards, all your extracurriculars. That's what I do. That's what I make my mentees do, right? Sometimes it goes to 2 pages, 3 pages. Don't worry about it. Then you start to optimize and condense, right? All So when you're doing this first pass, try to quantify as much as possible, right? If you're doing it for the first time, you will struggle, right? Because I think it takes some time for you to phrase it in a manner that includes the broader impact, right? um, so try to quantify as much as possible, right? And finally, focus on impact, right? Not the routines, right? Not that you were doing that you were following up with multiple stakeholders, right? There must be a reason why the firm wants you to do multiple stakeholder follow-ups, right? So include that broader impact that you are delivering because of this follow-ups and coordination, right? um, Step three is about refining the achievement statements, right? So always start with action verbs like spearheaded, implemented, developed, right? Because it should highlight what you did, right? um, and then in most of your achievement statements, start to think of which transferable skill are you highlighting, right? For example, and let me give you an example here. As I said before, right? Firms are looking for math nerds, they're looking for high achieving people, and they're looking for people who work well with diverse set of stakeholders, right? Who are amazing with working with different sets of people, right? So these are the three things, right? um, if your resume is over indexed on your quantitative ability, right, but you have less achievements in terms of leading and influencing people, right, I would say that you will need to bring in more achievements in terms of leadership and influence, right? Similarly, if your resume is thin on achievements, you'll have to incorporate more achievement focused, more impact focus, right? So try when you're drafting your resume, think about what the resume screener will take away from your resume, right? Will you have confidence that you are somebody who has the intellectual capacity to do the job? You have high achievement orientation. Will you have confidence that you are good in terms of working with people, right? So ensure your resume covers these all three aspects, right? And finally, craft compelling sets of achievements, right? So result, context, action is the best format to use, right? Because the result comes on the left. So somebody, when he's reading your resume, they're reading from left to right, right? So ensure that you use the visual hierarchy, right, such that the result comes on the left, right? The quantifiable impact comes on the left, right? So here, for example, accelerated time to market by 40%, right? So this time to market improvement by 40% is the impact that you delivered, right? So the resume screener should be able to see that first, right? And then talk about the necessary action. It should be action and then the context, right? Let me give you some example here, right? So this is something that I recent. This was um, um, a initial resume drafted by one of my clients, right? So here, for example, the client had drafted that, okay, he implemented a new pricing model that improved profit margins by 15%, right? There is the result and impact here, but it's coming in the end, right? And the same thing is happening over here. There is an impact which is coming towards the end of the sentence, right? And here also the impact is coming at the end, right? So what we did is that first we moved the impact, right, the result, to the left, right? And we gave more context, right, so that the resume screener can understand the scale of impact that we have delivered, right? So for example, here we say increase profit margin by 15% by implementing a new pricing model to optimize revenue streams for a SaaS company, right? So this context actually gives more detail to the resume screener and more confidence that this is high achieving impact, right, that you have been able to deliver, right? The same thing we do here, right? So I refine this to include to bring in the result towards the left. We bring in the action that the client took, that is, he designed a customer retention strategy and gave the necessary context, right, for a subscription based e-commerce platform, right? um, a similar result is highlighted over here in the final achievement statement. So we brought in the ahead of schedule result earlier, and we include a quantification of it, right? And also the quantification of how many engineers he led, right? So so this is how you transform your achievement statement, right, from a RAC format, right, wherein your impact is coming much later, or there is not enough context for the resume screener to understand the scale of this achievement, to an RAC format, which is a much better, impact focus, and more clarity is given to the resume screener to understand the scale of impact, right? Yeah. So and finally, right, step 4 is about customizing your resume, right? So as I said earlier, right, you will need to research the company that you're applying to, the culture and the values, and also the kind of role that you're applying to, right? So if you're applying to an implementation associate role in McKinsey, for example, right, the kind of skills that you want to highlight may be slightly different than compared to a digital associate, right? If you applying for a digital associate role, in order to stand out from the other applicants, you will need to emphasize more on your interest in the digital space, right? So if you've done some certifications there, if you have work experience relevant to your digital transformation, I would include a lot of them, right? And then you should be proofreading your resume, right? So um, don't try to do it alone, right? Either ask a couple of your friends to help you out, right? Because when you have developed your own resume, it's possible that you miss out on certain obvious aspects, right? So ask your friend to read through it, ask another friend to review it again, right? And ensure that you have at least few people look at it before you submit, right? Ensure the formatting is good, right? So um, firms, especially resume screeners, right? Um, they are consultants are heavy on attention to detail, right? So if on your resume or cover letter they see some obvious formatting mistakes, see some obvious spelling mistakes, then that raises red flags, right? So even if your um, profile or achievements are very impressive, these small errors may end up costing you the interview invite, right? So ensure that the formatting is consistent, ensure that there are no obvious spelling mistakes and other such issues, right? Which you can actually mitigate to an extent if you leverage your network, right? And ask for feedback, right? So um, what I typically tell my mentees is at least get it reviewed by few people, right? It could be friends, it could be other well wishers who can look and spend time and look at your resume multiple times and give you feedback, right? Let me share an example with you, right? Because I was till now talking about the key principles, right? But I think if I give you a template, I think it helps you visualize better, right? So if you look at this resume, right, which actually got an MBB offer, right? It's a very clean professional layout. So no images, no graphs. It's one page. It's easy to read, easy to glance, right? Um, it is the timeline is consistent. The way the timeline is included is very consistent, right? It's on the right. It's right aligned. There is no overlap or confusion in your career progression, right? So I see a lot of resumes wherein they would have included experience one moves from year, let's say 2018 to 2020, and then they have another experience from 2019 to 2021, right? So that's confusing. That raises a bit of red flag for the resume screener. How could you be working at two companies at the same point of time, right? So ensure that there is no overlap or confusion for the resume screener when he's reading your resume, right? um, Also maintain consistent formatting when, like for example, if you have um, included a specific job title, right, ensure you include it in a similar manner, right? For example, if you have used italics for job titles, ensure you use the italics format for all the job titles, not just for one, right? um, and as I said, I know resume screeners or consultants are heavy on attention to details, so ensure that the spacing is appropriate, right? If you have left a certain spacing between your education and experience section, and if you have a different spacing between your leadership and hobbies and experience, that also raises red flags for a resume screener, right? So ensure uniform spacing, consistent formatting, right? Similar header formats, right? So very clean, professional layout is what consulting firms look for, right? And also it's optimized for ATS, right? So firms don't use ATS, at least consulting firms don't use ATS to that extent. But yeah, but if some firms are using, I think using a clean layout helps you maximize your chances that the ATS can pick up some target keywords, right? The other thing that I was talking about is highlighting the quantifiable achievements, right? So, for example, notice this individual, he starts with the impact, right? Reduced turnaround times, the realized increase in revenue of $1.5 million, assisted business in realizing $20 million cost savings. So there is a lot of quantifiable, broader revenue, operational or other impacts that have been highlighted in the professional experience, right? So when you focus on outcomes, sorry, when you focus on outcomes, it's easier for the resume screener to understand your scale of achievement, right? Um, the other thing to add here is that if you have, let's say, four achievement statements, what I typically recommend is that start with your highest impact achievement statement first, um, and then the lowest impact achievement statements, have them somewhere in the middle, and then your further highest impact, right? You could include them in the end, right? So essentially, your best achievement statement should come at the top and at the bottom, and your least impressive accomplishment statements can come in the middle, right? It's kind of a sandwich approach, right? Again, we are trying to maximize the the or we are trying to use visual hierarchy, right? So when somebody is reading a resume, they will try to look at the first line and the last line, right? And also read left to right, right? So that's what we're trying to optimize for, right? um, if your GPA is about 3.5, do highlight it, do bold it, I would say, right? I would recommend bolding it. If you have any awards, any other educational accomplishments, you could include them, right? Um, yeah, so that's the key thing about resume that I wanted to cover, right? Let me also get into the cover letter part, right? Um, I think there's a question: would you recommend bolding um, all numbers on the resume? Not You could bold certain elements. For example, I recommend bolding your GPA. If you have a target school, or if you work with a big brand name employer, definitely bold them, but not every impact in the achievement statement, because uh, then the bolding effect is lost, right? The screener will not be able to see your GPA or your key things, right? Um, so you can definitely use AI, but I use AI more from a review perspective, right? Whether this makes sense, whether the grammar is appropriate, whether there is any spelling mistakes, right? But don't try to design your entire resume using AI, right? Because for a human eye, it's sometimes easier to understand, okay, this is AI generated or written by somebody, right? Written by a human, right? So therefore, use the AI, right, for review, but don't generate your entire resume using AI, right? That's the key thing I would say, right? Um, then in terms of cover letter, right? So what you should be looking at a cover letter is try to go deeper into your most high impact achievement statements, right? So this is the kind of template that I recommend my mentees follow, right? So you start with um, your interest in this particular firm and in this particular position title, right? And you talk about where does your enthusiasm stem from, right? Why do you want to apply to this specific firm, right? And you can bring in some research that you have done on the firm. If you've spoken to people within the firm, you can bring that in, right? This is a good um, place to actually show the resume screener that you've done your homework, right? You've spoken to, let's say, 3 4 people within that particular firm. You can bring in aspects that those people introduced you to, and therefore you are interested in the firm, right? um, and then you should talk about the traits or the skills that you will bring to the firm if you were to join them, right? What I typically recommend is your first trait should be something quantitative, right? So any quantitative accomplishment that you have, analytical accomplishment that you have, right, which gives the resume screener the confidence that you have the intellectual capacity, the analytical depth to do the job, right? So the first trait, typically I would recommend something analytical, something quantitative. Trait two, I would recommend interpersonal, right, which indicates that you're good at working with people, good at collaborating with people, right? You have achieved certain milestones by leading and influencing a set of people, right? So include an interpersonal element. Third skill or trait will depend on your background, right? For example, if you're a PhD student, the concern, or at least the question a resume screener would have, is this is he's a PhD student, he's more into research and analysis. Is he also good at working with people? Has he delivered outcomes while collaborating with different sets of people, That's the concern a resume screener will have if you're a PhD student. So what I would do here is include any achievement, leadership, or any achievement which I've achieved through collaboration, right? If you are somebody from a humanities background, right, who does, and so the concern of the resume screener would be, will this person be able to handle the analytical part of the job, right? So I would include something wherein there is a significant analytical achievement, right? So depending on your background, right, you should highlight those skills, those achievements, right, that compensate, for your specific background, right? And finally, you bring in this element wherein, I look forward to contributing using these qualities, right, to deliver high impact solutions, right? And then finally, you thank the recruiter, right? If you're able to research and understand who the specific recruiter is who will be screening your resume initially, you could include your recruiter name, right? If not, talk about it as the office specific recruiting team, right? So the way the resume and cover letter will be screened is that first look will be with the recruiter, right? So they will screen initially, and then they have certain criteria. For example, are you from a target school? Do you have a high GPA and other elements? And once those criteria, if they are met, they send it to a consultant to further screen, and the consultant takes a look at it and further shortlists, a set of people that they would call for interviews, right? So this is how it typically happens in offices. This is what I've seen, right? So where you can differentiate yourself is through networking, right? So if you're not from a target school, but if you're able to network with people within this firm, talk to people within the firm, are able to get somebody influential within that firm and that office to refer you to a recruiter, your chances of getting the interview invite go up, right? And let me share my personal experience, right? When I was a resume screener years back, right, what would happen is, if I see a particular CV and a cover letter, right, and I see certain elements missing, right, but if this person has a strong referral from a principal or from a partner or from a even from an engagement manager, right, I would still shortlist him, because this individual, the engagement manager, the principal, I would expect they have spoken to this individual, right, and they have tried to understand his motivations, try to understand his achievements, and after speaking to this individual, if they are referring him or her, then at least we should interview them, right? So that's how networking can actually help you, offset some of the aspects, right? So if you're even if your accomplishments don't stand out among the application pile, a recruiter or a resume screener might still call you for an interview, right? However, there are some limitations, right? So if somebody has less than 3 CGPA, right, even if he has a strong referral, right, a lot of times the resume screener or the recruiter might say, what, this is our cutoff. We don't hire people below the CGPA, and therefore we will not call you, right? But if your CGPA is between 3 to 3.5, even if a cutoff is about 3.5, still, if you have a referral, they might call you for an interview, right? So it all depends on the context, right? It depends on the office, and also it depends on whom have you networked with, right? How much influence do they have in that office, in that specific firm, right? So the higher the hierarchy of influence that you have, the better your chances to be called for an interview, right? So let's talk about networking here, right? The first principle, right, that I coach my clients around is networking is about forging genuine relationships, right? It's not about sending a cold email on LinkedIn, or I mean, cold message on LinkedIn, or a cold email and then asking for a referral, right? So it's more about building a relationship, a long-term relationship. You may not have an immediate benefit from that relationship, but over the long term, right, when you put in something in the relationship, there will be something that you can take out in future, right? That's how you need to view this particular relationship, right? So try to add value, right? Be respectful, right? So when you so the way you should approach it is that yes, there will be a lot of cold messaging that you will do to a lot of consultants working in that firm, right? And we will talk about the networking funnel, right? But expect low response, but that's okay, right? So if you um, email, or if you send a message to 100 people, maybe 5% or maybe even less may respond, but that's okay, right? Your chances or likelihood of response goes up if you can bring in some common connection. If you're from the same university, right? Or if you're from the same city, right? If you can bring in that connection, or if you have common friends, if you can bring in that connection, the likelihood of response goes up, right? So do your research, right? List on all potential contacts within that particular firm you want to reach out to, right? um, Research on whom else do you know who might know this person, or what kind of common connection you can highlight in the message that you send to them, right? um, so when you talk to them, right, be authentic, right? Share your story, share your experiences, share why you want to join this particular, or why you want to work in consulting specifically, right? Ask questions, be genuine, be interested in their experiences, right? So you could ask open-ended question like, what's been your rewarding project at this particular firm, right? Respect their time, right? If they say, I don't have time, but I can talk to you at maybe 10 p.m., we'll be willing to put in the effort to be awake at 10 p.m. and have that call, right? And follow through, right? Very important to follow through, right? uh, Consultants are quite busy. They're working really long hours. Many of them are working 80 100 hour weeks, right? So they may want to refer you, they may want to put in a word with the recruiter, but they might have just forgotten, right? Or they just got busy with the other priorities, right? So do follow up, keep in touch with them. Don't follow up every day, follow up, let's say, once in 2 weeks. And be polite. If after 2 or 3 follow-ups there is no response, accept that, okay, maybe they have got busy with other priorities, and then look at your other contacts and try to leverage them, right? So it is a difficult process to go through, right? It's time consuming, and most people you reach out to may ignore you, but that's okay, right? Because all you need is one good referral, right? That's all you need, right? And all you need is one offer, right? Because you'll be working at only one company, right? So put in your efforts to network, right? And what I typically recommend is the funnel approach, right? Which is focus on a broad net, right? When you're applying to consulting, don't think I will apply only to McKinsey New York office and no other office, right? um, uh, Try to choose a broader net, right? Apply to multiple consulting firms. There are a lot of great consulting firms like LEK, Oliver Wyman. Also, the Big Four have significant strategy verticals. What happens is that when you focus on a broader net, one, you will get practice, right, of networking, of talking to people, also of, let's say, interviewing, right, which will help get into your target firm. And second, if you take a longer term view, if you get into consulting, be it LEK, be it Roland Berger, you can always move to MBBs, right? A lot of my clients are overly focused on one specific firm, one specific location, and many times that kind of becomes limiting for them, right? So cast a broader net and be diligent in terms of maintaining a tracker, right? So have a contact log, track your networking interactions. Have you sent them an email or a message on LinkedIn? Did they respond? Did you fix a time with them? Did you have a chat with them? When the next follow up should happen? So keep a track, diligently track it, right? And then in terms of increasing your responses, right, try to pay close attention to the common connection that you can bring in, or is there anything unique about the background and role that you would like to highlight in that particular message, right? So if you customize the message that particular individual, rather than sending one message to hundreds of people, right, then the likelihood of response goes up, right? So reach out and customize your message to that particular individual you're reaching out to, and engage, right? So if you get the opportunity to speak, right, to a particular individual, do your research, have your elevator pitch ready, as to what you're doing currently, why you want to be why do you want to be a consultant, what kind of skills and traits that you can bring to the table if you were to join a specific firm. So so one, do your homework, have your elevator pitch ready so that you can create that lasting impression with the networking contact, right? And don't immediately ask for a referral, right? So the conversation should not end with you asking for a referral. Rather, the conversation should end with the firm contact volunteering to give you a referral, right? And even if that doesn't happen, that's fine, right? So you don't need to push for a referral, because eventually one of your networking contacts will give you a referral, and that will help you stand out, and therefore you will get the interview, and therefore you'll get the offer, right? So take it as a um, um, long term effort that you will need to put in, right? um, that's the gain referral part, right? So treat it like a conversation. Don't treat it like a transactional event wherein you speak to somebody for 5 minutes and then you ask for a referral and they give you a referral. It's more about relationship building. I think about it as you are building a relationship with somebody that will last for some time, right? And keep that relationship going, right? That's how you need to think about it, right? There are a couple of questions that have come in, and let me start answering those questions, right? Because this is what I had to cover, but I think want to leave some time to also answer your specific questions. I think, Shubi, you're asking, do the employees at consulting firms have a limit of referral they can give out every quarter over a? There's no limit of referrals, right, Shubi? But s- what a particular firm employee will do is that they will um, talk to you, right, and assess if you are worth their referral, because they're also putting their reputation at stake in a manner, right? I mean, in a way, right? Because if they're referring you, they're saying to the, or they're telling the firm that you have vetted them, right? So they would like to talk to you, right, and understand whether they should refer you or not, right? And referral actually is beneficial for firm employees, because if the one of the referee joins the firm and stays for 6 months, or different firms have different timeline, they get paid a referral bonus, right? So it's in their interest to refer you, right? So don't feel that you're taking somebody's time, because it's in their interest to refer you and therefore get the referral bonus, right? um, so there's a question: how should I talk about or include in my resume? I have very different experiences in different industries, right? So you can mention the industry. If you're, for example, you're a consultant, you talk about there is an impact that you delivered. You talk about for, like, for a leading oil and gas company, right, or for a leading auto major, right? So that way, when they see that there are multiple industries there, they will understand that you bring in diverse industry exposure, right? um, so I think somebody's asking, McKinsey does not give referrals. They said they told the recruiter to pull my resume, right? So I think I'm not sure about that, because every firm encourages referrals, right? I don't, even if you don't use the term referral, it could just be as simple as the engagement manager or principal sending an email to a recruiter that we should talk to this person, right? There may not be a referral bonus attached to it, right? But that kind of an email that going out from somebody working within the firm in that particular office, right, is considered by the recruiter, right? So they encourage, right? So all these firms, especially on in target schools, they conduct a lot of campus events, right, and they do a lot of networking, right? That is to identify, right, whom should we interview, right? So all the campus events, all the networking events that firms organize, actually the intelligence gets fed back to the recruiter, right? That, okay, these are the kind of people that that seemed interesting. they also were keen to apply to our firm, and I think we should interview them, right? So putting in a word, right, that this person we should interview is considered favorably by most recruiters, right? um Somebody's okay, how's the work life balance in those big work life balance when you are a junior, let's say associate, when you're starting out, will be bad, right, in strategy consulting specifically, right? um some offices do it better than the other offices, depends on which office you're applying to. But um but work life balance, if you want to prioritize work life balance, I wouldn't say strategy consulting is the right career right? In the initial years, work life balance will be really bad, right? um, so it doesn't have to be a manager or a principal also, right? But I think if you think about it, right, they would have more influence, right? If a consultant puts in a word for you, the recruiter could ignore, right, if they think that there are certain elements missing. But if a manager or principal puts in a word, they are more likely to call you for an interview. Yeah, that's how you need to think about it, right? Also, if the manager or principal is from that specific office that you're applying to, let's say you're applying to New York office, and the manager or principal who's referring you or putting in a word for you is from that New York office, the chances of the you getting the interview invite go up, versus somebody who's from some other office, like an Atlanta office principal putting in a word for you when you're applying to New York office, may not carry that much influence, right? That's something that you need to keep in mind also, right? So network with people in the office that you intend to apply to, right? So that will carry more influence, more weightage, right? Um, I think it's necessary to include a cover letter. Dipshika, always include a cover letter, right? Always include a cover letter. Many firms will say, okay, cover letter is optional, but if you want your applications to stand out, always include a cover letter, because whenever so there are actually, when when your resume is a screen, right, there are kind of three piles. One pile is auto reject, right, which is, there are some defined criteria. If those criteria are not met, you get rejected, right? There is one file of maybe, and one file is strong yes, right? So in the maybe file, they will read your cover letter, right? The first and third pile, they may not read your cover letter, right? But the maybe pile, they will read your cover letter, right? And then they will decide, okay, which of the maybes we should call for an interview, right? So always include a cover letter, right? um, so I think the other factor, somebody's asking how to compensate missing a key attribute factor. I think I've already answered it, but you could include some elements of it in your cover letter, right? Also, it's a good practice to include an addendum in your cover letter. For example, if you have low GPA for, and if you have a genuine reason that you can explain. For example, you were too much involved in certain community, or a startup that you were driving, or let's say you had to work during the time that you were studying. So you can include a small paragraph in your cover letter saying, okay, this is why my GPA is low, but that doesn't reflect my actual abilities, right? Um, yeah. What So after consulting, what are the most exit opportunities? Exit opportunities are quite varied, right? A lot of them go to um, uh, startups,